What's up, everybody?
Feeling that hard dose of depression since we got our grades.
Yeah, well, I gotta get a good bell curve one way or the other, right? Everybody was just doing too well on the projects. What am I supposed to do?
Man, I'm taking that sex class and he's like, screw a bell curve, you know? If you pass, you pass. So I think you should take that route.
I
Midline be an
have
A.
okay. They don't look the CPSC department doesn't look too fondly on giving everybody an A,
Who cares?
unfortunately.
Who
I
cares?
had a friend that was doing the same thing I did where he started teaching in the fall semester and he gave too many people an A and they didn't ask him to come back.
So, people leave all the time on their own accord.
Well, yeah, but I want to keep teaching this course.
Okay. Maybe you should double the size of the class and fill it with bots, and then give
Somehow,
those bots C's
yeah,
and D's.
yeah, somehow pay tuition for a bunch of bots.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're smart. You worked for CCIT. You got it in, don't you?
Well, don't worry, you won't have anything that hard until the final.
So does that mean the final will be harder?
Equal to, perhaps, maybe harder. I don't know.
As long as we can go back and see previous questions that we've already submitted on the final, that's probably okay.
Well, then there's going to be a lot more reading and writing code.
Well, the main thing that happened to me was like the questions that I didn't have that other people had, as soon as they were asked, I was like, shit. And then I was
Yeah.
just like, pass the question, and I can't go back and answer it again because I didn't, like, it was a weird question.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. So I'm just going to have to make the final a little bit different so the questions don't reference other answers and then probably add more coding stuff to it. Although I do like being lazy and taking questions from the quizzes and putting them in there. So maybe I'll have a little bit of that too. Do y'all think the study guide appropriately covered all the topics that ended up on the midterm?
Yeah, I think it covered most of it.
Well, good. I'm going to go over the midterm today. But what do you guys think was the hardest question?
The ones where we didn't understand the actual topic or the question until it was already asked about, and I was already on question 15.
Well, I mean, that doesn't seem hard. That's just bad luck. Maybe you should have asked your questions. But yeah, I'll try and make the next one goable, backable. Opted to just forget that the exam ever existed. Well, that's it's a good way to deal with it. Seem to represent the class pretty effectively. Okay. Nathan's a single issue voter here. Yeah. Um, you thought 0.0.0.0/0 was the same as /0. I'm pretty sure for it to be a valid site or address, you have to have something. Um, normally AWS only allows 0000/0. Based on how CIDR works, you probably could have any IP address /0 and it would be valid. So I was willing to accept that. But nobody put that stuff in. So did you get partial credit for that one, Tommy? If not, hit me up. Remind me on Slack. Okay, you got partial. All right, cool. Because it was partially correct.
Yeah, for the first question, I put https:// and I don't think I got partial credit for that because it was supposed to be HTTPS.
Yeah, I think drop me a reminder to look at that because I'll probably give you partial credit for that. All right. Give me my chat window. Where is it? There we go. All right, so I guess let's start with the midterm. And if you all want to think up any questions you have for the project, whatever we're on for, I guess, we'll get to those after this. I think I might have covered most everything we need to do for project 4 already, but I'd be glad to go over any stuff that we skimmed over pretty quickly, trying to get to the midterm study last 2 weeks. So just be thinking on that, and when we switch topics, we'll switch over to that. And I really don't have too much to go over today, and don't have too much to go over Wednesday because I think we're just on the final stretch of project 4 here. So yeah, I figure I could go over the midterm instead. So here's the URL. What's the protocol or schema? That's just this part right here. I think the : / that's a delimiter, just like if you had a colon port over here, or like get variables, they don't really include the question mark, for example. So I will give partial credit for that, but I just kind of skipped over things sometimes when I was trying to get all these things graded. So yeah, HTTPS for that. The path, I was willing to accept either of these with or without the /, but it should not contain anything after the PHP because that's not part of the path. Also, the path shouldn't just be password because it needs the file name as well. The only time it doesn't need the file name is if you do an index.html or index.php, and that's kind of implied. So if this URL didn't have an actual reset.php at the end, then the path would just be /password/ or maybe even /password/ index.html. That would also work just fine, because it's the implied kind of thing. Here's the true or false. Will this get sent to the server? No, it won't. The server is the / at the beginning important? It does have to be there for the URL to work. If you don't have this /, then it's going to think password is part of the host name. And when you are building out stuff in like HTML, the difference between a / and no / is it's the difference between whether it's an absolute path or a relative path to where the page was loaded. So in that sense, it's important. But specifically for this answer, because I was saying like : / here is kind of the delimiter and not really part of the schema, or the protocol up here, I was willing to accept no / here because technically that's like the first / is the delimiter between the path and the host name. But in reality, most people would probably say this top one is the correct path. So no, this hash does not get sent to the server. The server can send URLs with hashes in them, and you can build links with hashes in them. But when you click on one of those links, this data does not appear anywhere in the HTTP packet going to the server. Only this stuff does. And to some extent the host, if you have a host header, but it's not in that top line. The top line of the HTTP packet will just have this whole thing here. So here, how many bits are unchanging? 8. I think some of you may have done 32 minus 8, which is the wrong way to do it. And maybe this question was a little confusing on the wording. But I wanted to know, like, all right, so if you have a range starting at like the lowest IP that's in this range all the way to the highest IP, this 10, this 8 or this byte here won't change, but the rest of them will change as you iterate through all the IPs that are in the range that this CIDR describes. We have to SSH with the Ubuntu user, Ubuntu at your IP address. It's not EC2 user. It is EC2 user if you were using like Red Hat or something else as your image, or CentOS, but we're using an Ubuntu EC2 instance, so it's Ubuntu. CIDR strings that include every IPv4 address. We talked a little bit about this earlier, but this is the only thing that Amazon will accept. Technically, the way CIDRs work, you could have any IP address here and say /0, and that would all define the same range. There's no real good, there's no real good reason to do that, but it's technically possible. So, but since Amazon only accepts this kind of the answer I wanted, like when you're filling out a security group and you want to allow everything to be able to hit port 80, you have to put this exact thing in there. For IPv4, for IPv6, it's got, I think it's like : /0 or something like that. But yeah, that's the IPv4 version. What is the subnet mask of this thing? Well, the subnet mask is all of the bits that are after the slash is, so it's the first 24 bits make up the subnet mask. 24 bits is 3 bytes, so it's this one. That makes sense? And here we go. If we make a GET request to Apache with the path of /index, where does the file live on the server? I was willing to accept either the directory or the directory with the file in it, because it was kind of a ambiguous question. So any of those will work. If you didn't have a slash at the beginning, I think I might have given you partial credit. If I didn't, hit me up. Well, I guess it's 2 points, so you're just going to get like 1 point, so it's not going to help you too much. But you need the slash at the beginning, because just like above when we were talking about the difference between slashes and no slashes in a path in the Linux operating system, if you do like a copy and you're trying to put something in this directory and you leave off the slash, it's going to think it's a relative path. So it's going to look for the var folder wherever you happen to be running that command from, instead of looking for the var folder in the root of the file system. So you kind of need to know that you need slashes at the beginning of things. So here's some terrible code. This is just using axios.get to create a promise. And then it runs, so this will complete successfully, this top line here. This one, this first .then will throw an error. So arg bad path will error. This is kind of a hint that, like, inside arg there is no .bad, and inside .bad there's no .path. So at a certain point it's going to get undefined, and then you try and do the next dot off of undefined, and it's going to throw an error. When it throws an error, it skips any .thens until the catch is called. So it will skip, it'll run this one, it'll skip this one, it'll run the catch, and then the catch resolves the error as far as, so it's in a rejected state, so that's why it skips this .then, and then since it's in a rejected state, it ends up in this catch, and this turns it back into a resolved state, and then this one runs. So the answer is just 2 and 3. So some of y'all put quotes around this, and that threw off my correct answer thingy, but I see why, because I put quotes around my thing. So I gave you all full points if you put quotes around it. Yeah. And here's another promise. This does the set timeout stuff that I did last Monday. So this is us creating a new promise. And we're passing a function into it, and we have resolve and reject, and that's all fine. It takes 1 second, and then it calls its resolve function, so it actually resolves the promise with the number whatever x plus 1 is, so that's 12 plus 1 is 13. As soon as it resolves, so that's 1 second after we run this code, it'll resolve itself, and it'll call this. This sets another timeout, and as soon as it starts that clock on that timeout, it returns. So it returns 14 now. Not that that matters, but immediately while this set timeout is running, it immediately runs the next one. So it waits 1 second because of this set timeout, and then it runs through this code pretty much immediately for our purposes. And it creates the timer, but it doesn't actually wait the 1 second before it returns. So this all happens 1 second, this 1 second after. It happens pretty much immediately after it resolves. So 1 second. I also accepted 1,000, although, how many seconds? This is kind of like reading comprehension. If there was no resolve, would it wait? Yes. So this, if you never call resolve, this promise is never resolved, and these .thens never happen. So promises can sit around for 2 or 3 hours, or until your browser crashes from old age or whatever. But as soon as you call resolve or reject, that's what kicks off all the .thens. And so yeah, somebody put in, I think, 1,000, and I was like, I think I see what you mean, but like, come on, friend, read seconds, not milliseconds. Or maybe they thought this was actually in seconds. So remember that set timeout is in milliseconds, not in seconds. But I think I gave that person full credit. So functions. The arrow functions, functions defined with arrow notation can use the arguments keyword. Remember, that's an array that has all the arguments that were passed into the function, and you can iterate through those without putting arguments as a parameter in the function call. Yeah, you can't do that with arrow functions. That's false. If I register a path in Express.js, and it's just an app.get, it has /user/username with a little colon thingy in front of it, and then it has our callback, and inside our callback, how do we access the username? So if I wanted to console log username, or if I wanted to just save it to a database or something, how do I get that specific username string out of this path? And the answer is rec.params.username. I also accept rec.params bracket the string username, because it is like params is a key value hash, and you could even do square brackets around params as well, because that rec is just a key value hash. But this is what I was looking for. Some people said username. That's not right. Some people said, I think, rec.query or something like that, or response.params or whatever. So there are a couple of things that weren't right, but I tried to give some partial credit wherever I could. If you just said username, I don't think I gave anybody partial credit for that. But yeah, it doesn't create a variable in your scope that you're like, oh, I get this free variable, I didn't have to create it. No, you have to pull it out of the request object. All headers are cookies. No. All cookies are headers. Yes. This is all cookies are headers, but not all headers are cookies. Like the host header, that's not a cookie. So this is false. Here's more code. I feel your pain. Most people got this right with multiply 5. This was actually code talking about closures. So you didn't, because of how easy this code was to read, you probably didn't even have to know that it was dealing with closures to just kind of like, oh, well, if this is adding something and it has with 5 and add, and there's a multiply function up here, then multiply 5 should probably be, I mean, this is like almost pattern recognition, right? Like you didn't really have to understand all the fancy stuff that's going on in this code, that it's using a closure and returning a function up here and all that jazz. So, I think that was that's why it was only 3 points, because I could have written something more complicated that dealt with closures, but I didn't really feel like it. Maybe I'll make you guys write a closures thingy for the final, but or maybe on a quiz. I don't know. What is the first word in an HTTP request packet? That would be the method, the get. Zach, I thought it was a trick question at first. You're like, wait, isn't it just the exact thing, but you just replace all the adds with multiplies? Is that, yeah, okay. I really do want to give like a quiz where all of the answers are A for like, you know, a 16 question quiz or something like that, and just have people freaking out. Like, what? There's no way all of these are A. What are you doing? And then like maybe have one that's a C at the very end and just be like, let's see how many people will screw that up. Next quiz. Yeah, I'm not going to tell you which one. If you notice a pattern, maybe I'm just screwing with you guys. When it's online, I don't even think about the answered letters. Yeah, that's fair. So yeah, this is the method. This is like a get or a post or a put. That capital letter thing is the very first word of the first line of the HTTP request packet, not the response packet. That's got different stuff in it. I think that's HTTP 1.1 or whatever is the first word in that. So yeah, that's the method. This form, write a form to post to the auth that contains two inputs, username and password. The input should have the appropriate type and attribute and be labeled with username and password. Send the contents with the key, username and password respectively. Include a submit button. On a Scantron, though, that's pure evil. A psych professor here did that for midterm once. Yeah. Yeah. I would really enjoy doing that to people, especially if I'm in the class watching them take the test. Just like, I don't, just, are you getting this? What? Huh? That literally is quiz 1. This is how you can do the final. Now, I'm not going to throw some easy thing on the final like that. Come on now. Okay, so for this one, I think a lot of you possibly just memorized or maybe even copied the code from the project to answer this question, but there's one thing that's different. Like the login code from the project, for example, this is pretty much that, the stuff you had to fill in on the login index. So this part right here, send the contents of the two inputs with keys username and password. In the project, we label everything with username, but we send it to the server as user ID in the project, just because I wanted you guys to know the difference between the name attribute on an input and what that does when it gets sent to the server versus the actual labeling and ID and other stuff on an input, and how that doesn't affect what gets sent to the server. So if you guys just plain memorized or just straight up copied the code from your project 4, then you got points off because you didn't use a user ID. Some people even put in like JavaScript code that was like, instead of HTML, they wrote JavaScript code. I probably could have said, write the HTML code to make a form to post to, but I kind of assumed that you guys would know what language I wanted you to write this in, and it's not JavaScript. So sorry for those of you that used JavaScript. Did they write the full JS to build out the DOM? I think maybe one person did. A couple people wrote the receiving code that would actually catch the form in Node.js, which was just like, that's not right at all. And some people wrote the packet that this would send to the server and not the HTML. Like they actually tried to write out the HTTP packet, and I'm just like, reading, people, come on, read. So the answer to this is, let me switch over to Sublime and find my thing. it is pretty much your, nope, it's what you put in here, which I guess since I already told you it's project 4, I should probably not show you the actual solution to this part of project 4, but it looks like this. This is all I wanted, except for this needs to be username. This is pretty much exactly right. People wrote other things. They had different types of labels. Some people forgot to put type password in here. I took points off for that, but you got partial credit. But I think I mentioned in the question that I wanted you guys to appropriately do appropriate type attribute. So the appropriate type attribute for a password is still type password. It is not type text. So that's what I wanted. And some people even put the entire HTML thing in there. Do we need an attribute for label? No, you just need to have some HTML that puts the word username next to it. Some people put a placeholder value in the input as an attribute. That works fine too. So let me go back to Sublime, go back over here. So some people actually put the entire HTML, like the entire thing, including document and head and body and all that jazz. And I'm just like, this is more than I asked for, but thanks. Okay. You can still get full credit for that. Some people took out or just had these two inputs like this, and then they had like a placeholder, username. That's also acceptable. So that works too. I didn't take any points off for that. I just, you need to tell the user what we want them to put in the first and second text boxes. We can't just put two text boxes on the screen with the login submit button and just be like, all right, you figure out what goes in here. I don't know. I just wrote the thing. So yeah. Host header. If we send this, what is the host header? It does contain the port. That was the tricky part about this question. The host header does indeed contain the port. It does not contain anything before these slashes, and it does not contain anything after those slashes. It is just that part in the middle. If it's an IP address, that'll go in the host header. If it's a host name, that'll go in there. If it's a host and port or IP and port, it will still include the port for both of those situations. Write code to create a button with inner HTML of click me, ID of my button, and attach a function called onClick that already exists elsewhere. So add it. Yeah, so that all kind of, I think most people were able to do all of that. Some folks forgot the ID my button part. Added as a child element to a DOM node with container with ID container that already exists in the document. Some people took this to assume that the container variable existed in JavaScript. That is not correct. This says that it exists in the document. You still have to do get element by ID on it. So what does the rest of this say? Assume this code will be put into an init function. So you don't have to write the init function yourself. Some folks did that. You don't have to write the add event listener. Some folks did that. I didn't take points off for that part. You don't need to make it wait on the document and all that stuff. This is something that I harped on, that you should not put just like bare JavaScript that references the document inside your index.js or your JavaScript code. You need to put it into an init function or some other function that's called after the document's ready. But you didn't have to worry about any of that because you're assuming that you're writing code that will be plopped into a pre-wired init function. So if we go back to Sublime, I believe the code should have been something like this. Actually, it's on click lowercase equals on click uppercase. So this variable, as the question said, this variable still exists. I would very much prefer for you to use const. Const does let you set attributes. Const means I cannot have B on, oh, what did I do? I cannot write into B, but I can change values inside B. Like I can't do B equals, I can't do this again, right? I can't actually assign something into it with an equal sign. But I can still make changes, but because remember, B is a pass by reference type variable. It is a pointer to something, right? So it's a pointer to the Java representation of this button DOM element. Since it's a pointer, you're never changing that pointer with .id and stuff. You're following that pointer and then changing the stuff in the data that it points to. But for anything that's a pointer like that, as long as you don't change the value of the pointer, just like in C, it should be fine. Okay, so then we had B dot, what was the other thing that we needed to do? Inner HTML. And I did not take points off for using const. Let is okay. I think I even saw some vars. I don't think I took any points off for those, but I left some all caps. Why use var here? Question mark, question mark, question mark, question mark in your comments. Add it to tiled element. Yeah, okay. So that's pretty much all you needed to do, those 4 lines. You could make it 5 lines if you wanted to do this part, and then that if you really wanted to break it up, or 6 lines, I guess. So that's all you needed to do. That is the solution for this. Okay. So these 2 questions, their existence and the fact that I asked you pretty much to write those question or that code here, that is the reason why I didn't let you go back to other questions. I probably could have done something different or been less lazy, but I probably could have just described this in words like, imagine you have a form, and on this form you have an action attribute that's auth, and you have a method attribute that's post, and inside it you have 2 inputs, one with blah and one with blah, but I kind of want you to get used to reading the code, so I put the code in there. And that, yeah, so that made the whole thing harder because of the existence of these 3 questions. If I click submit, write the first line of the HTTP packet that's sent to the server, so since it is method post, you're going to have a post as your first word in there. The action tells you where it's going to go. And then you need HTTP 1.1 at the end. Some folks left that off. I only took minimal. I think I took 1 point off for that. Can't remember if there were too many other normal mistakes. One or two people may have just, yeah. I can't remember how that one went, because this one, a lot of people kind of screwed this one up. A lot of people tried to say that it would just be user ID : user and password : password. I took 2 points off for quotes around auth. Well, you can't have quotes around auth. That's gonna break. I mean, the packet doesn't look like that. Maybe it should have been 1 point. Maybe that should have been 1 point. Okay. This one, I think I took 1 point off if you wrote everything correctly, but you put user ID instead of username. That's kind of understandable. But the name that we were sending this for is user ID, not username. It is ID username. It is labeled by username, but when it sends it to the server, when it builds the packet and sends it to the server, it will be user ID. So I think I took a point off for that. Some people wrote this in JSON format. That is not how forms work. Forms send things in this format, same thing as a GET request, at least by default. I'm sure there's a way to change that. You can plug in a JavaScript callback that when you try to submit the form, it cancels the submission and then does an XHR instead, and then you could send it as JavaScript and everything would be hunky-dory. But This is just a regular HTML form, and regular HTML forms encode the data like this. And whether you do post or get as your method determines where in the packet this goes. So if you do a get method, all of this stuff will go in that first line. It'll be auth question mark, all of this stuff, right? But since it's post, all this stuff goes in the body of the HTTP packet. So that's it. That's the final, or that's the midterm. That's not the final. Anybody have any other questions or complaints about how terrible and evil the midterm was? I think I got a lot of people knocked off guard thinking that it was going to be super easy because I grade everything super easy on the projects and let you resubmit it. And I was just like, so I was maybe a little too evil. Good. False sense of security. Good. I'm preparing for Halloween. Chaotic evil. It might have actually been, I don't know, like once, not chaotic, what, ordered evil or whatever? Lawful evil? Yeah. My ability to care has decreased this week. Aww. I'm sorry, Lily. Took a huge hit to the morale on that one, huh? Got to build yourself back up. Okay. So, what all did I not talk about for Project 4? Was anybody able, will the final be similar to the midterm? Yes. Yes, it will. There may be more code, and I'm hopefully going to find a way to ask all kinds of questions without making it to where you can't go back. So hopefully it'll be a little bit more permissive on going back and redoing other questions. But yeah, I'll just be sitting in Zoom, same as I was for this, and answering questions. Do I give exemptions for the final? Yes. If you have an A before you go into the final, you can skip the final. But you said we would never be expected to code without Google. Well, I mean, I did. You're right. So, yeah. Okay. All right. That's fair. Perhaps that'll be another change for the final. Craig over here playing 5D chess. Yeah, I planned that from the beginning. It's not like I totally forgot that I said that. I mean, normally, previous times I've done this, I did it with pen and paper, and I actually had people ask me questions and I would Google it for them on the projector. So previous iterations of this class, I did keep my word on that. And then I'd kind of, this whole making people do the midterm and the final through Canvas, and kind of threw me off a little bit, threw me off my game. So he's been messing with us ever since making the update your info page on Clemson's SSO. Yeah, that was a good one. Yeah. It's the gift that keeps on giving, you know? It even hits me like every week, and I'm just like, although I'm going to start getting stuff for like, hey, I need to go take my Title IX and security and whatever the other, like there's a couple of ones that I added in that only employees see. And I'm going to start getting messages about those too. So yeah, phishing training. Yeah. The Duo remembers your location. Your location? What do you mean? Well, there's a little checky box in the Duo thing that should remember that you logged in to Duo for at least a day. Yeah, for only 24 hours. Well, I mean, that's the point. What's the point of doing an MFA, but only like, one time every 3 months? That's like not really protecting your account. I know you're lazy. That's why we put it in there. Clemson VPN. VPN is not an excuse for good security. Yeah, VPN is slow. But if you do, for some things, if you use VPN and you're coming from a VPN address, you don't have to Duo, so that's true. If you get your computer stolen, yeah. No, you can't stream 4K games on Twitch. I mean, I can't even play 4K games, much less stream them, but I probably could. I just don't have a 4K monitor. No, what are you talking, console peasant? I got a 1080 in my computer. It's probably not up to the task of doing 4K, but then again, I got a 1440. I know. Well, the 2000 series sucked, so I was waiting for 3000, and now it's like back ordered till next Christmas or something because NVIDIA's like, we need more metal. I don't know. So yeah, I'm probably going to get like a 3060 because that'll probably be a pretty good boost from 1080 to 3060. But I don't really need to do that. Is it? So should I get like 37? I'm not going to get like a 3080 though. That's just ridiculous. But the only reason, I thought the 3060 would still be a moderate like score improvement. Yeah, the 1080 Ti is pretty freaking cheap. Deuce, Twitch.tv. No, I mean, the only reason I need to upgrade my card is because eventually Steam is going to send me a Valve index, or Valve's going to send me an index. But that thing is still 3 months later on the 8+ weeks out before I get it back order. So as far as I know, that shit hasn't moved at all. But yeah, that's the reason I need to upgrade. I'm not going, I mean, and if you guys don't have any questions about the project, I suppose class is over. And then I don't really have much to talk about. I'll try and think of something to talk about on Wednesday, but it'll be a short class as well. How do you run the Postman tests? That is a good question. I was wondering if somebody was going to ask that. Let me start up Postman real quick and I will show you. There we go. Do I just have like 2 windows? Why do I have 2 windows here? That's cool. Okay. Delete. Yes. All right, so we got this here. You go in and you go to new collection and you go to, where do you do? No, cancel. Import. Yeah, that's the right button. So you click this import thing, you find the file I gave you, and drop it in here, and then it will create a project for folder. And inside this folder, you have all of these tests. And if you open any of them, you can actually look at the test. So if I just close a bunch of these real quick. So this one is get user info, and you look at it, it's got this variable at the front of it. To set that variable, you have to go into your environment. You have to click this little eyeball to create an environment. And you set it to whatever your host name is. So I think Project 5, it's a lowercase, and so I have that in there as well. But for Project 4, it's uppercase host, and that's the variable without the little squiggly brackets on the side of it. And you type in your IP address. You don't need the Project 4 part of the path because, again, that is here. So whatever you need to put into this to make it a valid URL to talk to one of your endpoints, that's what goes into host. So you click this eyeball, you add I can't remember how you do this exactly, but you might need to add an environment first. There should be like an add button if you don't have an environment. If you have a default environment, then you just go and you set a key and an initial value and it works. Session cookie is kind of created by the tests. So generally you probably don't need it, and you should probably delete it if it's in there. And so you can run some of these tests and some of them will work as expected, but if you run them out of order, they might not work as expected. Because for example, which one? There's, okay, user auth test with random user. So if we go over here and we look at the body, it's sending a user ID of this and a password of that. And if we look at the headers, I didn't really change any of these, but I made sure that it was the form URL encoded. And if you go to the test, you can actually see the tests that I'm looking for. And if I send this, it's probably not going to work. Why is that in? Oh, because I deleted my host header. Default. What did I do?
Yeah, one thing I've noticed about Postman is that every time that you reload Postman, it just deletes all of your environmental variables.
It doesn't delete it for me. I don't know what your problem is.
Yeah, I don't know either.
Are you on a Mac?
Nope, I am on a custom-built Windows machine. And every time I just reloaded the page, it just pew. I did not save to my collection.
Ah.
So that might be what we need to figure out how to do right now.
I don't know. I never had to do that. So, I mean, default, and it's got all the stuff in it. When I open it up, it still had something from like the last thing I tested against somebody. So, no idea. I mean, have you Googled it? Anyway, test 2, the one you're on. Yeah. So this actually should, I need to actually start my project 4 up. Sudo service project for server start. Okay, so if I rerun this one, I think it comes back and all 4 tests passed. You can see here that test results, all of these passed. That's what I'm looking for. You can also, if it doesn't pass, you can look at the body of the request and you can look at the raw header and the packets, the status codes over here, how long it took and all that stuff. So this helps you kind of debug what was going on. But if you don't run them in order, something that creates a user and then one of these other tests use that thing, or if you haven't created a user and when it goes to see, hey, the user test for this thing, does it work? And you know, whatever. So it does, this is why the whole reason we have a delete database function. You should probably never expose this to the internet in a real situation, like a real like application you're writing. You probably don't want anybody to just start guessing passwords until they can delete your database. That's not a good thing, but it makes sure that I can set everything back to a known initial state and then run through all of these. So you can run them one by one, and that's all well and good. If you click this little arrow and you click run, it'll pop up with a collection runner. And then you just click run project at the bottom and it'll go through and run all of them for you. So that's how you use Postman. Any questions? No problem. If there are no other questions, you get 30 minutes back today. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy your afternoon.
Thanks, Fred.
No problem. Y'all have a good one.
You too.
Thanks, Craig.
No problem.